The following program features the opinions of the host. Listeners are encouraged to seek their own understanding.
The Rapture. It's a pretty weird event. In the blink of an eye, millions, perhaps billions of people just disappear. Reminds one of the scenes from the 1980 sci-fi movie Night of the Comet, in which clothes litter the landscape where people once stood partying or shopping. In the Christian religion, the rapture is an event that is believed will take place during the end times and before the second coming of Yeshua, when he returns to the earth in judgment. But is the rapture taught in the Bible? Along with the rapture, many Christian denominations teach that there will be a 7-year tribulation before Christ makes his second coming to earth. Christians who believe in the tribulation event have different opinions about when the rapture will take place during that tribulation. Some believe it's before, others in the middle somewhere, and others believe it happens at the end. And again we ask, does the Bible teach such things? The rapture, the tribulation, it can all be very confusing. Welcome to the Ghost in You podcast, a podcast about the weird, the wonderful, and the terrifying in the Bible. I'm Diane Student, your guide and host on this strange journey through the Bible. Episode 18, The Great Disappearing. Let me just start off here by saying, obviously, I'm not a scholar, and I myself have spent time in all of the different camps when it comes to eschatology. The study and belief in the end times in Christianity is known as eschatology. There are 4 main categories of eschatology: preterism, premillennialism, postmillennialism, and amillennialism. The millennium is a 1,000-year period of time that is taught by some to take place after Yeshua's second coming, when he will rule and reign on earth before the final judgment. Some of the categories have subcategories, with preterism splitting into full preterism and partial preterism, and premillennialism splitting into historic and dispensational. And dispensational splits into 3 more subcategories of pre, mid, and post. Let's look at each of these categories and subcategories, and then I'll share my thoughts on each, supports for, or arguments against each. Preterism teaches that basically all prophecy has been fulfilled, and the only thing we're waiting for is the second coming of Yeshua. The end-time prophecies in the New Testament were fulfilled in 70 AD, when the Romans attacked and destroyed Jerusalem. The covenant with Israel ended, and the new heavens and new earth are what we are living now under the new covenant. The subcategory of full preterism believes that the second coming, judgment, and resurrection of the living and the dead took place at the end of the Old Covenant age, when Jerusalem fell and the temple was destroyed. I won't discuss any more on this because this has already been deemed as heretical, and I agree. Partial preterism is what most preterists are, and people who hold to this belief believe that most biblical prophecy has been fulfilled, save for the last 3 chapters of Revelation. There's no tribulation or millennium, and a rapture would take place when Christ returns. Premillennialism believes that there is a 1,000-year millennium and that Yeshua will return before that time. This splits into historic premillennialism and dispensational premillennialism. Historic believes that prophecy reveals the entire church history and that the nation of Israel will have a national salvation before the millennium, but no restoration of Israel, and it has no distinction from the church. The two are now one. This isn't that the church has replaced Israel, but that we are all children of God with the same plan of salvation. Basically, we've been grafted into Israel. There is a figurative 1,000-year millennium, meaning a very long period of time. Dispensational premillennialism believes that there is a 7-year tribulation before the literal 1,000-year millennium, and Israel has its own plan in which it will dominate during the millennium. This is split into 3 subcategories of pre, mid, and post-tribulation, referring to when the church will be raptured from the earth. Postmillennialism believes that Yeshua comes after the millennium, which they don't believe is a literal 1,000 years. They also believe that the world continues to get better and better and more Christianized, and that has to happen before Yeshua returns. This basically means the church will establish the millennial kingdom and not Christ. People who hold this view also think prophecy should be interpreted allegorically. There is no 7-year tribulation in this belief. Amillennialism does not believe in a literal 1,000-year millennium, and as a matter of fact, they believe it started at the ascension of Yeshua. When he entered the heavenly kingdom, he sat on his throne at the right hand of Yahweh and rules and reigns from there currently. So they don't believe that Yeshua is going to set up a millennial kingdom on earth and rule from here. The A before millennial means anti or no, but that really doesn't fit amillennial. A better description would be that they are current millennialists. They believe that much of Revelation is John giving a replay of what he witnessed in earth history. So it's similar to preterists in believing that much of the prophecy has been fulfilled and that this occurred in 70 AD. So those are the 4 categories of eschatology. Now, before discussing what supports some of these beliefs and what doesn't, let's look at what the rapture is supposed to be. The term rapture comes from the Latin Vulgate's use of the word rapio, meaning to seize, snatch away, which is equivalent to the meaning of the Greek word harpazo. The word rapture never appears in the Bible. That doesn't mean that it's not necessarily true or that the Bible doesn't teach it, because the word Trinity also doesn't appear in there. And clearly, if you're a Christian, you believe in a triune God. The terminology didn't come around until the 19th century. The basic belief is that Yeshua will come to take his church to be with him. Pre-tribulation believers think this is going to happen before the 7-year tribulation and that it's a secret rapture of the church. The reason it's called a secret rapture is because Christ is not going to appear, rather Christians are going to disappear. Those left behind will suffer through the tribulation. Mid-tribulation believers think that God's wrath isn't poured out until the last 3.5 years of the tribulation, and that the church will be secretly raptured then. Post-tribulation believers think that the church will go through the whole tribulation and then be raptured. The raptured church will celebrate the bridal feast and then return with Yeshua to defeat Satan during the Battle of Armageddon. Then there's the millennial reign of Yeshua, where Christians will rule and reign with him over those who made it through the tribulation and weren't sent to the abyss with Satan. There are 3 passages that people who believe in a rapture use to support their position. The first is Matthew 24, verses 37 to 44, which reads, "For as were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in those days before the flood they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day when Noah entered the ark, and then they were unaware until the flood came and swept them all away. So will be the coming of the Son of Man. Then 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken and one left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and one left. Therefore, stay awake, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming. But know this, that if the master of the house had known in what part of the night the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and would not have let his house be broken into. Therefore, you also must be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect." Another passage is 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 to 18, which reads, "But we do not want you to be uninformed, brothers, about those who are asleep, that you may not grieve as others do who have no hope. For since we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so, through Jesus, God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep. For this we declare to you by a word from the Lord, that we who are alive, who are left until the coming of the Lord, will not precede those who have fallen asleep. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a cry of command, with the voice of an archangel, and with the sound of the trumpet of God. And the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And so we will always be with the Lord. Therefore, encourage one another with these words." The third passage is Luke chapter 17, verses 22 to 37. And this reads, "And he said to the disciples, the days are coming when you will desire to see one of the days of the Son of Man, and you will not see it. And they will say to you, look there or look here, do not go out or follow them. For as the lightning flashes and lights up the sky from one side to the other, so will the Son of Man be in his day. But first he must suffer many things and be rejected by this generation. Just as it was in the days of Noah, so will it be in the days of the Son of Man. They were eating and drinking and marrying and being given in marriage until the day when Noah entered the ark and the flood came and destroyed them all. Likewise, just as it was in the days of Lot, they were eating and drinking, buying and selling, planting and building. But on the day when Lot went out from Sodom, fire and sulfur rained from heaven and destroyed them all. So will it be on the day when the Son of Man is revealed. On that day, let the one who is on the housetop with his goods in the house not come down to take them away, and likewise let the one who's in the field not turn back. Remember Lot's wife. Whoever seeks to preserve his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life will keep it. I tell you, in that night there will be 2 in one bed. One will be taken and the other left. There will be 2 women grinding together. One will be taken and the other left. And they said to him, Where, Lord? And he said to them, Where the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. While Christians all believe that Yeshua is returning for us, the idea that there's going to be a big event like the Rapture with a 7-year tribulation is a fairly new concept. The mid-1800s were a time when many unusual thoughts and differing religious beliefs, particularly in Christianity, emerged. Most people are familiar with spiritualism. It got a firm foothold at this time, and thousands of people around the world started trying to communicate with the spiritual world in various ways. The Christian religion was experiencing its own awakening and reform with the Second Great Awakening. This was a time when revivals started around the United States and religious movements like Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Seventh-day Adventists were birthed. At this same time, a man named John Nelson Darby introduced the idea of dispensationalism, and this launched talk of the Rapture, a 7-year tribulation, and literal 1,000-year reign of Yeshua on earth. Okay, so that is a basic breakdown of the different eschatological views and an overview of the Rapture. So now let's dig into each of these positions and see what are the strengths and weaknesses, and probably the closest to what the Bible teaches. And I want you to keep in mind that none of this matters in the scheme of things when it comes to salvation. The only requirement to be saved is to believe on Jesus Christ and the work he did on the cross and through his resurrection. The issue of eschatology has divided the church, but it shouldn't make us enemies because we have different views. And as I said earlier, for me personally, I've spent time in several of these camps and changed my mind through the years, and honestly, I don't really have a hill I would die on as of yet. I've even come to a different understanding within the last month or two. My hope is that there is no great tribulation and that Yeshua returns and everything is grand after that. Let's look at preterism first. It's the least talked about, and when a Christian says they're preterist, most other Christians recoil as though they are vampires confronted with a cross. I remember that years ago I listened to a show called The Bible Answer Man hosted by Hank Hanegraaff on the radio. And one day he came out as a preterist, and the next thing he knew he was losing sponsors and was given the cold shoulder by many Christians. I had never heard of the concept, and upon first glance I thought it was nuts. How could anyone say that all prophecy had already been fulfilled? And now a little break for a word about one of our sponsors. While there is no doubt that full preterism is heresy, partial preterism seems pretty darn true to me when I started to really look at it and dig in. Yeshua seems to have been pretty clear in Matthew 24. In this chapter, Yeshua has just told his disciples that the temple will be torn down, and so they've asked him when this will happen and what the signs are of his coming again. Verse 34 reads, "Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place." To me, he's talking to the disciples about things that will happen to them and things that are going to happen in the world around them, which is their generation. So the temple would pass away during their generation. Others in the church argue that this verse is talking about the generation that starts to see the things that Yeshua described in this chapter, which are things that are going to happen in an end time scenario. So the generation that first sees this end time scenario, you know that he's getting ready to come. And a lot of Christians point to Israel becoming a nation in 1948, that started the generation. And a lot of the people who were born at that time are now in their 70s, reaching into their 80s, saying that a generation is about 80 years old. I've also seen other people say a generation's 40 years old. Regardless, the things that Yeshua described have been going on for centuries. Wars and rumors of war, false prophets, lawlessness, and the love of many growing cold. We've been experiencing that forever. I mean, I imagine people who went through World War I and then World War II probably thought, wow, this has got to be the great battle that it talks about at the end of the Bible. What did happen is that the temple was torn down in 70 AD. And for those of us that like weird non-coincidences, because I don't believe in those, Titus and his legions burned the temple on August 10th, 70 AD, which was the 9th of Av on the Jewish calendar, the same day that the king of Babylon burned the first temple in 586 BC. I never have believed in coincidences, and when it comes to Yahweh, I definitely don't believe in coincidences. He does things on specific timing, and this seems pretty darn specific to have both temples be destroyed on the same day, hundreds of years apart from each other. We don't know the death dates of most of the apostles, but most were probably not alive for this event, save for John. So this was a prophecy fulfilled as far as I'm concerned and as far as preterists are concerned. Partial preterists believe that this means that most of Revelations has been fulfilled as well up until Revelation 19. After that is all future things to come. Because of the similarities, most preterists refer to themselves as postmillennialists or amillennialists. They're all in the same camp with much of the prophecy being fulfilled. Postmillennialists add in that Yeshua comes after Christianity has dominated the world, after a golden era of Christianity, if you will. This is where postmillennialism loses me. Yeshua told us in Matthew chapter 7, verses 13 to 14, "Enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter by it are many. For the gate is narrow, and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few." That doesn't sound like most everybody becomes Christian to me. So right now I'm good with partial preterism, but have tossed out postmillennialism. Historic premillennialism was held by many early church fathers and believes that Yeshua comes after the tribulation and before his 1,000-year reign here. The issue here is whether there's a great tribulation. The idea that there is going to be a 7-year tribulation is taught as an interpretation of Daniel's 70th week. We could really get into the weeds here, and perhaps I will do that in a future episode. The basics are that Daniel's given a vision, and here's the end of it in Daniel chapter 9, verses 24 to 27. 70 weeks are decreed about your people and your holy city to finish the transgression, to put an end to sin, and to atone for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal both vision and prophet, and to anoint a most holy place. Know therefore and understand that from the going out of the word to restore and build Jerusalem to the coming of an anointed one, a prince, there shall be 7 weeks. Then for 62 weeks it shall be built again with squares and moat, but in a troubled time. And after the 62 weeks an anointed one shall be cut off, and shall have nothing. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Its end shall come with a flood, and to the end there shall be war. Desolations are decreed, and he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week, and for half of the week he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of abominations shall come one who makes desolate, until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator. Most historians and Bible scholars agree that this prophecy was fulfilled all the way up to week 69 when Jerusalem is restored and rebuilt and the second temple is built. This 69th week ends with the coming of Jesus the first time and starting his ministry. But then things change and the 70th week is said to be a future event. To understand this, one needs to understand that a day was like a year. So the 70th week is supposed to take place over 7 years. And this is where people who believe in a tribulation get their idea. The tribulation is Daniel's 70th week. But one has to ask themselves, if Daniel got this vision because he was asking about the future of the Israelites, why would Yahweh throw in this tidbit about the end times? And where is there an indication of a gap in time? It makes more sense to believe that the first 3.5 years of the 70th week is Yeshua's ministry, then he's cut off or crucified, and the next 3.5 years is the time when the Apostle Paul comes on the scene and starts his ministry to the Gentiles. So there is no future 70th week, meaning that there is no great tribulation coming. And that's where I stand on this. And it really is only something that I recently studied and embraced. Most Christians today fall into 2 camps with eschatology: dispensationalism or amillennialism. Amillennialism was what has been taught for nearly all of church history, and that is important because having something new pop on the scene makes it very suspect. Are we really to believe that for nearly 2,800 years, the church didn't discover this little nugget that's been the core teaching of an end times philosophy? I grew up Lutheran and never heard much about eschatology. I don't think the denomination thought it was all that important because we were already living through a millennial period and we're just waiting for Christ's imminent return. It wasn't until the Left Behind books came on the scene in 1995 that I found out that there was this other teaching about dispensationalism. And this is what is mostly talked about with End Times Now. It's what the televangelists all preach and what some of my most cherished Bible teachers believe. Hence, why I myself jumped in and then just had to decide whether I was pre, mid, or post-trib. I spent little time in pre-trib, but always hoped it was true. I sat in mid-trib for a long time because I figured putting the church through the fire of some of the tribulation would be the perfect way to prove and refine the faith. God's wrath certainly wasn't meant for the church, and the last 3.5 years of tribulation is supposed to be that. Or was it? I started wondering if it wasn't just Satan and his wrath being unleashed on mankind. And then I ended up in post-trib, and was sitting there until just a couple of months ago. That's why I did the episode on the red heifers. But now I'm starting to come back to my amillennialist upbringing. People in the church are making a ton of money off all of these end times books and specials and conventions, and quote-unquote prophets are running rampant, making their predictions and pointing to world events to support their claims. I also couldn't get into the idea that Israel has a different plan of salvation. The Bible is clear on salvation. If a Jew doesn't believe that Yeshua is the Messiah, they will not be saved. They don't have this other plan of having a third temple and starting sacrifices. Yeshua ended all that. Why would he support it being reinstituted? He was the final and end sacrifice. After Darby introduced dispensationalism, the theory made its way across Europe and into America. The term comes from the fact that the theory teaches history divided into 7 dispensations. Each dispensation has Yahweh dealing with man in a different way. There's innocence, conscience, human government, promise, law, grace, and the millennial kingdom. In 1909, C.I. Scofield wrote his translation of the Bible with references, the Scofield Reference Bible. He had no formal training in theology. This became the most popular Bible with Protestants at the time. Again, a man with no formal training in theology. Scofield went on to help found the Dallas Theological Seminary, and this popularized dispensationalism even more. And the Moody Bible Institute soon followed with teaching this idea of a pre-tribulation rapture. But you may be asking, there are those Bible verses that you shared earlier that clearly say that one will be taken and another left. So what does that mean? We have to wonder, who is being taken? In Matthew chapter 24, verses 36 to 39, Jesus says, "But concerning that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. For as were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in those days before the flood they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day when Noah entered the ark, and they were unaware, until the flood came and swept them all away, so will be the coming of the Son of Man." If we are comparing this time to the flood, who was taken away, washed away? The unsaved, the corrupted, right? As I talked about in our Nephilim episode, the flood was meant to wipe out the Nephilim, the people who had corrupted human DNA. They were swept away. Noah was left here with his family. He was left behind. Let's look back at that Luke chapter 17 passage again at verses 34 to 37. "I tell you, in that night there will be 2 in one bed, one will be taken and the other left. There will be 2 women grinding together, one will be taken and the other left. And they said to him, 'Where, Lord?' He said to them, 'Where the corpse is, there the vultures will gather.'" So the one being taken is taken to a place for dead bodies. That isn't heaven. And that's the problem with Left Behind. They are presenting something quite the opposite. The other problem with eschatology is this business of when the rapture takes place. In order to be pre-trib, a believer has to believe that Jesus not only returns twice, but that his very next return is secret. Yeshua nowhere taught in the Bible that he would secretly return before he comes for his triumphant second coming and judgment. He's coming with a shout. He's coming with a trumpet. The entire world will see. Every knee will bend. There's no secret there. It's going to be very public. We're going to know that he has returned. So where am I in all of this? First, our end could come at any moment. We should always live with imminence. We should always be ready. I believe that Yeshua is ruling and reigning now, and that Satan has a leash on him. It is said that Satan would be bound in the end times. During the millennial kingdom, he's supposed to be bound. I think he's bound right now, and our interpretation of bound is not that he's being completely held back and can't do anything, because nobody can look at the world we're in right now and be like, oh yeah, Jesus is in charge, and peace and love and everything else is ruling. There's no way that's happening. But I think Satan has a leash, and the main thing that he's being prevented from doing is letting the spread of the gospel happen. So he's got free reign to do all kinds of corrupt and horrible things, but he can't stop the gospel from spreading. There is no coming tribulation as far as I'm concerned. Satan will be given a short season before Yeshua returns to deceive the nations and gather his army for the Battle of Armageddon. There are some who believe that this short season has already begun, and I could kind of believe that, although I'm not completely convinced. Looking around the world, it seems like we're getting pretty darn icky around here. Then Yeshua returns, raises the dead, gathers the believers. This is the rapture, although I wouldn't necessarily call it that, but he's going to gather the wheat to be with him and conquer Satan and his minions. And then we have the rest of forever to live with a new heavens and a new earth. It's pretty basic, but amazingly supernatural. Everyone should study the Bible for themselves to work through what they believe. Is Yeshua coming soon? What do you think about the end times? What is your eschatology? The ghost in you knows. Thank you for joining me on this episode. May God bless you and keep you. This has been a production of History Goes Bump.